listeners who don't know what WD-40 is the thing that I spray into my hinges so they don't squeak.
So WD-40, in fact, was born back in 1953. There was some challenges with condensation and corrosion in the Atlas space rocket. The people from Convair at that time went out and said, can we solve this problem? So the couple of chemists at WD-40 got in their little lab and they started to formulate stuff. Well, Formula 1 didn't work, neither did Formula 10 or 15. Formula 25 didn't work, or 27 or 28. 32 didn't work, nor did 38, nor did 39. But guess what, Maya? Formula 40 worked. And that's why it's
Amazing.
called WD, Water Displacement 40th Formula.
I love that story. Welcome to Workplace Weirdness, the non-HR HR podcast where we dive into the strangest office situations and most awkward workplace dramas. I'm your host, Maya Kadar Kovalsky, and I'm a former chief culture officer and head of people. I've seen and heard it all, so truly no judgments. This is a safe space to get real and explore the cringy, confusing, or chaotic side of office life. So grab your coffee, kick back in your swivel chair, and listen up. Today, we're talking about growth opportunities, egos, and dumbassery with Garry Ridge, the chairman emeritus of WD-40 Company and the culture coach at The Learning Moment. We're also discussing listener questions on enforced gratitude, micromanagerial insights, and an employee who's expected to run a kids' party bounce house on the weekend. But first, let's welcome the culture coach, Garry Ridge. Garry Ridge is a leader, coach, and passionate advocate for workplace cultures that foster belonging, learning, and success. As CEO and chairman of the WD-40 Company for 25 years, he built one of the world's most recognized brands by prioritizing those values. Now, as the culture coach at The Learning Moment, Garry shows leaders how to create workplaces where people feel valued and inspired. He partners with executives to build cultures of collaboration and purpose-driven performance. Garry co-authored a number of books, but his latest book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, articulates his belief that great leadership is simple, but not easy. Garry has been known to say that dumbassery is a superpower. Hmm, that's interesting. Hello, Garry. Welcome. Welcome to the show. I'm so
Hey,
happy to
g'day,
have you here.
Maya. It's lovely to be with you. Thank you for inviting me along. It's great to be here to have a chat with you and talk about things that I think are really meaningful.
So, first thing I have to ask you, you're probably the first person who turned the word dumbass into like a positive. Why is dumbassery a superpower?
Well, firstly, a lot of people think about the word ass, ASS, which is really about a donkey, not about someone's posterior or bottom. And, in Australia, because I'm an Aussie, sometimes calling someone a dumbass can be a sign of endearment. So, and honestly, admitting you're wrong and saying don't know is actually a superpower. So the book title allowed me to get people's attention about how those three words, which are I don't know, are so powerful.
Well, thanks for clarifying the use of the word, the etymology, so to speak. But absolutely, I think that's very powerful. So, can you give me an example, though, of how you'd say dumbassery has been used as a superpower?
Well, I can give you a lovely example. When I first started to lead a WD-40 company, I was in a meeting one day and someone was in the room giving a presentation. And, they were doing what I often call camouflaging issues with confusion to make out how smart they are. And I was sitting there listening to this presentation. And what was going through my head was, I have no clue what you're talking about. And everybody else in the room was sitting around the table with that, smile and enjoying the presentation. And I got a little frustrated in my head and I said, okay, this could be a career limiting move, but I'm going to do it. And at that stage, I was only a director of international operations and had moved to the US only a few months before. And in fact, the CEO was in the room and I put up my hand and I said, excuse me, not long in this country, but I have no clue what you're talking about. And everyone in the room went, ah, because nobody else knew either. So there's how dumbassery can be a superpower because it creates an environment where people can actually learn.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of executives or managers sometimes really deal with early on in their career to admit when you don't know things. It also really reminds me of The Emperor's New Clothes, if you know that story where the little kid reveals that the Emperor's new clothes are just see through, don't exist, but nobody else wants to say it.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say there are no stupid questions. That's so true. But the twist on that is, am I seen to be stupid because I'm asking the right question? And I think that's where people's fear comes into play, is that I may seem to be the stupid one because I'm actually asking the right question right now.
Absolutely. How did you get to a place where you felt okay asking that question?
Well, I think the three most powerful words I learned in my life were "I don't know." And when I was in my role at WD-40 company, I used to introduce myself as, "G'day, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right, chairman and CEO of WD-40 company, and I need all the help I can get," which is so true because success in business is not how you being the smartest person in the room. It's you being in a room, bringing out the smarts of everybody else. And once you expose yourself and display vulnerability, everybody else relaxes, and suddenly you get an enormous amount of brain strength that comes out in the room.
Absolutely. I completely had that reaction as you were saying that. I softened all of a sudden. Makes me smile, makes me say, okay, I guess if Gary's being himself, I guess I could be myself too. I'm impressed with that. I had an interesting experience earlier on in my career where I asked what you would maybe assess as a dumb question at a meeting. And later on, the manager pulled me over and was like, "Why did you ask that question? That was so obvious." And I was like, sometimes I like to test to see if everybody in the room is agreeing on that obvious definition. What was interesting was that my manager didn't feel okay in that space. They felt so self conscious that I, as their employee, asked that obvious question. So, what can we say to the managers that are, how can they encourage people also to be more vulnerable in those situations?
Well, firstly, they want to get rid of the title manager because you manage your bank account. You don't manage people. They want to really act what they should do, and that's being a coach. And a
Okay.
great coach and a great
I
coach
thought you were going
doesn't
to say, this person's just not cut out to be a manager. Sorry. Next.
I think it's so wrong. I'm gonna come back to your question, Maya, but let's role play for a moment. It's the first day in your new role at blank company. You walk in, and I'm going to be the one who's going to be your quote unquote manager. "Good morning, Maya. I'm your manager. I'm here to manage you." How does that feel? Or what about if you walk and say, "Good morning, Maya. I'm Gary. I'm your coach. I'm here to help you win. I promise what I'm here to do is for you and I to understand what the game's about. I've played this game a few times and I'm willing to share all of my learning moments with you. I'm going to stand on the sideline of your work and watch you. I'm never going to run on the field and take the ball. I'm not going to steal the prize from the podium for you. And I'm going to spend a lot of time in the stinky locker room with you as well, because the stinky locker room is where we're going to build trust and now expose our vulnerability. And you're going to get to know your team as well. Such a difference to be able to say, "I'm not going to manage you. I'm here to coach you to help you win," which I think is so important.
And changes the whole dynamic.
Absolutely. Our job as a leader is to make those we lead really stand on a pedestal. We're just there, at the beginning, when we put plans together, it's like sort of like a pyramid. The leader's on top. And what we do is we're putting all these things together and saying, "Here's our strategy, our execution plan." And then we turn it upside down and the leader goes to the bottom. And the leader is then there to help those that are in that pyramid actually win.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before you were talking about how to coach is actually to also be there for people's learning moments and to help them. So I understand that you launched a learning moment contest when you were at WD-40, which was basically an opportunity for employees to discuss their failures. How would you encourage staff to go public with you on their missteps at work?
Yeah, early on, learned that creating this environment I thought was really powerful. So I went out and I said, "Okay, everybody." And I think I was in my third or fourth year as CEO, although I'd been around the place for a while. And I said, "Okay, I want everyone to share with me their positive and their negative learning moments. And I want to really hear the negative learning moments. Now, let's define a learning moment. A learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. And there's no punishment for a negative learning moment. It's, in fact, a true opportunity to learn. And I said, okay, so what I'm going to do to get the ball rolling here, we're going to run a contest for 12 months. I want you to send me your monthly learning moments. We're going to have monthly winners. And at each month, we're going to give away, fill in the blank, the prize. But the grand prize was something very special. It was the ultimate winner is going to win a trip around the world, first class, with their husband, wife, or significant other to visit some of our offices and share how the learning moment's been great for them. Well, that's fine. And in the background noise, I heard, sure, you really are not going to punish her? There was this echo going on. So I think in the first month, I got 4 or 5 people who actually were brave enough to send me their learning moments. Well, they became my stars and heroes. I promoted their bravery. I took them on stage. I applauded them, showing the rest of the organization that this was to be recognized as positive. So the second month, I got 12, and I did the same. I made heroes of them, and they became the cheerleaders and the raving fans of the program. And then at the end, I was getting hundreds of these. So my learning moment there was, you really have to demonstrate trust. You can't say, trust me. You have to prove why people will trust you. And that turned into an amazing pillar of strength for the organization. Now, there's an interesting factoid here if you'd like to know about how WD-40 came about. Would you like to know
Oh,
that?
yes, I would love to know that.
So WD-40, in fact, was born from learning moments. Back in 1953, the company was called Rocket Chemical Company, a fledgling chemical company based in San Diego. There was some challenges with condensation and corrosion in the Atlas space rocket. The people from Convair at that time went out and said, can we solve this problem? So companies in the area who were in that industry space started to formulate stuff to solve the problem. So the couple of chemists at WD-40 got in their little lab, which probably looks more like a kitchen in those days, and they started to formulate stuff. Well, Formula 1 didn't work, neither did Formula 10 or 15. Formula 25 didn't work, or 27 or 28. 32 didn't work, nor did 38, nor did 39. But guess what, Maya? Formula 40 worked. And that's why it's
Amazing.
called WD, Water Displacement 40th Formula. From
Those
humble
of the
beginnings.
listeners who don't exactly know what WD-40 is, I mean, I know it is the thing that I spray into my hinges so they don't squeak, but I know there's many uses for it. Can you just describe what the product does?
There are 2,000 uses for it. And if someone's with us today in the United States, we're in more homes than Coke. We're under more sinks and in more garages. It's the blue and yellow can with a little red top, which it's a multi-purpose maintenance product that's used across many functions. So there's 2,000 uses on the website.
Very cool. Very cool. And I love that story that it took 40 times. It also just goes to show you in science, we're able to sometimes have a method to understanding failure, but sometimes in our own personal lives and in our own personal growth, it's a little bit harder to get in tune with that. So I usually actually ask this because I want younger employees within their career to learn through our mistakes that we might have had earlier on. So, are there any mistakes that you made early on in your career that taught you really big lessons?
No, I didn't make any mistakes. I had
Yeah.
lots of learning moments.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
let's move on
Yeah.
then.
Well, but yeah, I had lots of learning moments, and one of the true learning moments I think we can all take to heart is shut up. When I first became CEO and before I went through my master's degree in leadership and was fortunate enough to learn from great leaders like Dr. Ken Blanchard and others, I was a turbo D in the disc profile, which was be brief, be bright, and be gone. And I guess that served me well for a little while earlier in my career. But as I was given the privilege of leading others, I had to shut up and realize that really listening more and getting what I call bleeding tongue syndrome as a CEO And bleeding tongue syndrome is where you're always biting your tongue because, Marshall Goldsmith has a wonderful saying. He says, the more you get promoted, the more your suggestions become commands. And that is so true. You could make a suggestion as a CEO and suddenly it becomes an order. And so you have to be really deliberate and think about what it is. So I think one of my big learning moments was, shut up and let's bring out the best of others because, you don't have all the answers, Gary. You're a dumbass and dumbassery is a superpower.
What would you say to people who don't actually believe you're a dumbass? I mean, you're pretty successful in your career.
I'm a successful dumbass. And the reason I am a dumbass is because dumbassery is not about intellect. So, yeah, I am successful, but I'm successful because I realized at an early stage that not one of us is as good as all of us because you, as the leader, will stand on the shoulder of other great people.
What a nice way of putting it. I want to ask you the question that I ask all my guests. What was your weirdest workplace moment? And for you, I also want to extend it just a little bit. You could also add what's the weirdest WD-40 story that you've ever heard? So go for it.
I got dressed in a suit of armor. I got on a horse, and at 8:55 in the morning, I rode into Times Square in New York and stopped my horse in front of the Nasdaq Stock Exchange and dismounted my horse and took the WD-40 secret formula into Nasdaq to open the exchange to celebrate at that time the WD-40's 50th birthday, which was actually 20 years ago. So, yeah, right here I was riding a horse into Times Square in a suit of armor and watching everybody go
That's
by. WD-40, the formula is a secret formula. It's never been
right.
disclosed. It's a trade secret. So I was guarding the formula.
Ah,
So that was a lot of fun. And, I saw the guy in his undies playing the guitar there and whatever. But,
they
I,
probably
I
asked you
thought
for a picture with you as well. You look like one of the characters from Times Square.
probably, yeah. But it was really interesting that I don't know if any other CEO has ever ridden a horse in a suit of armor into Times Square.
Well, they don't really prepare you for that in business school, do they?
Oh,
By the way, had you ever ridden a horse before?
I'm an Australian. Of course I rode a horse. Haven't
Oh,
you ever?
okay, okay, okay. Any other WD-40 stories that you've ever heard?
I have a lot that I can't tell you in public.
That's the
But
ones I wanted to hear.
in Hong Kong, there was a python snake caught in the undercarriage of a public bus. And to get it out, they sprayed WD-40 around the manifold and the snake got out. But even funnier, there was a burglar who tried to rob a bank and he was going in through the air conditioning duct. And to get in through there, he got naked. So he was naked in an air conditioning duct. He got stuck. Of course, the alarms went off. The fire brigade came along and they sprayed some WD-40 in the air conditioning duct to help slip the nude burglar out of his
It's very
trauma.
similar to the Python story. I totally understand how they're related.
Yeah,
They're kind of,
yeah.
somebody got stuck in a strange place and yeah, they needed that WD-40 to help them get out. That's very funny.
I guess he gets kind of the dumbest thief award, maybe. I don't know.
Hey, it's a learning moment. It's okay.
Yeah,
Next
it's a
time.
learning moment. Next time.
Anyway, all right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us all your wonderful stories, Gary. So, before we get to our listener questions, let's stay up to date with the week in work, our take on a recent news story that might affect how we work or how we think about work life. So, the Wall Street Journal recently published an article called Everyone's Replaceable: New Ways Bosses Talk About Workers. It turns out that CEOs are ditching niceties. With the job market tightening and AI on the rise, many top execs are openly telling employees to work harder and be grateful to still have jobs. Perks are fading, expectations are rising, companies are trimming benefits while piling on responsibilities, sometimes even turning one job into three. This culture shift is sparking tension. Workers feel the power imbalance growing while some leaders defend the tough talk and even blame employees for not adjusting to the new reality. One of the CEOs interviewed also added, work life balance is your problem, meaning that companies' attitude towards employee engagement has definitely shifted. Gary, what are the long term risks of CEOs using fear based messaging to motivate their employees?
Well, this is where I have to introduce you to Alec, the soul sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated. And that's probably who we were. And I write about Alec in my book. And, honestly, if leaders think that building a fear-based culture where people want to escape from their workplace instead of escape to it, they have a wake-up call coming for them. The latest Gallup research tells us that 61% of people who go to work every day are disengaged. And I think some of the things you described are going to disengage people even further. So, Alec, the soul sucking CEO of Fear Inc., has some attributes and he has a big ego and little empathy. I think you just described that. They think they're corporate royalty. They want a fear based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know it all. They don't value learning. They must always be right. They hate feedback. So if you're going to execute these leadership styles, be prepared that people are going to be escaping from your organization. And actually, this is what happened during COVID. During COVID, there was a conversation about the great resignation. It wasn't the great resignation, it was the great escape. People were escaping toxic cultures. If anybody thinks that creating an environment that people feel absolutely uncomfortable in is going to motivate people to work, get a life. That's not going to happen.
Right. I'm with you. I don't see how you can have a workforce that's going towards productivity, innovation, any of the things that you need to have a thriving company without engagement, without the learning moments and the humility and everything that we spoke about before.
Do you think innovation's going to happen if people hate doing what they're doing? No way. Imagine if
Absolutely.
you went to a place where the leader actually loved and involved you in what they do. They are in servant leadership mode when they actually absolutely loved feedback. So, let's not get confused here. It's not about you, the leader. It's about how you bring out the best in others because great outcomes is the will of the people.
I'm just letting that sort of sink in. You have some great zingers, I have to say. It even takes me a minute to sort of understand the depth of them. So I just want to say, dumbass is just the title, but the truth, there's a lot of depth in what you just said. What do you think, as far as this article, going back to that for a second, would an engaged employee culture basically save an underperforming company? Do you think that is possible?
Absolutely. One of the questions I was always asked is why did we at WD-40, when I happened to be there during COVID, perform so well? And I said it's because we went into it with a very, very high engagement. We had 93% employee engagement. 98% of our people said they loved to work at the company. 97% said, I respect my coach. Now, their coach was their boss, right? We just changed the name. Most people leave organizations because they hate their boss. And we went into it because we had an organization that was highly engaged. Now, let me tell you this, our culture wasn't all about popcorn pizza parties and ping pong tables. You know, this is tough. This stuff is simple. It's not easy. So, I have a great friend of mine. His name's Charlie Maloof. He owns a chain of Ashley furniture stores out in North Carolina. And he has a quote. He says, culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crock pot approach. And that is so true. You cannot
Love
sprinkle
it.
fairy,
Love that.
yeah, you can't sprinkle
Mhm.
fairy dust on an organization and change the culture. So we went in really high and we came out really high. And it's because we lived that for so long. This is a journey. It's not a one time event.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Gary. We're glad that you're out there building the kind of corporate cultures that people want to escape to, not from. So thank you for that. But now it's time to go on a quick break. When we come back, we have a question from a team lead stuck in a performance gratitude circle. I wonder what that is. See you after the break. When I was chief culture officer, it was my mission to create a workplace where employees feel supported and valued. And there's no profession where that's more important right now than in education. That's why school district leaders are loving Alpaca, an innovative and award winning employee engagement platform designed specifically for K 12 schools. It all starts with one simple question: how are you doing? Alpaca's simple, delightful pulse surveys let teachers share real, honest feedback while giving school leaders actionable insights. Teachers love how easy it feels to take this pulse survey every month. No 1 to 5 scales, just quick, meaningful feedback for principals to know where to celebrate and where to focus so that they can create great team culture. Teachers love feeling heard, principals love the insights, and districts love keeping their teachers. Every employee wants to feel heard, seen, and valued. And when teachers feel supported, schools thrive. Alpaca is transforming workplaces for educators across the country. Learn more at alpacapax.com and see how modern employee engagement can make school the happiest place to work. Welcome back to Workplace Weirdness. Before we get to our listener questions, I wanted to mention that if you have a workplace question, please drop us an email at info@workplace-weirdness.com or leave a voice message at speakpipe.com/workplace weirdness. We'd love to hear from you. I'm here with former CEO of WD-40 and board member of Gorilla Glue, Garry Ridge. Gary, we've got a listener who was dreading the monthly gratitude circle at work for good reason. Let's check it out. Dear Workplace Weirdness, at my company, the leadership team is really focused on building a culture of love and gratitude, which I really appreciated. We have company wide end of the month gratitude circles where we're expected to share compliments or emotional reflections. But recently, we went through a mass layoff and they cut a third of the people in my team. In the next monthly gratitude circles, there was nobody in leadership acknowledging that any of this had happened. Because I am a team lead, I was also expected to give gratitude. It was kind of nauseating seeing all the disingenuous gratitude. One exec said that he is thankful for the new bathroom update and how they added mouthwash, saying it's such a special touch. Then he even played 2000s boy band music to end the session. Like, what the hell? Who gives a shit about effing mouthwash when a third of the team was just let go? Okay. Wow. A mass layoff is a pretty big elephant in the room, wouldn't you say, Gary? How should that have been handled?
There's a great opportunity there for a display of vulnerability, transparency, and sincerity. I think leadership had the opportunity to really lay it on the table and share with the remaining team that there were reasons for this. This is why. It's not something we wanted to do. It's something we wished we didn't have to do, and show vulnerability. Also, show if they actually took some pain as well, because I think that's important. I've often said it's better that all of us suffer a little than a few of us suffer a lot. And I can tell you a personal story around that if you're interested. Um,
Absolutely, yes.
a number of years ago, we were finishing our year and the company had a reasonably good year. And most of the growth came from outside of the United States. So people in the United States who worked in the United States team didn't qualify for a substantial amount of what was then called bonus. And I changed the name of that to a growth reward plan because I didn't like bonus. However, because I was judged on the global number, I was entitled to my bonus. And I wrestled with this a lot. And in fact, I went to the board and I said, I am going to decline taking my bonus this year because I can't walk the aisles with the people in the US team where I spent a lot of time because it was the corporate office. And for them to know that they worked really hard and I did too, but they weren't rewarded. I rejected a 6-figure bonus that year. Now, interestingly enough, I didn't publicize it. But eventually, because it's recorded in our public filings, of course, there was a footnote in our 10K that said that I had declined to take my bonus. And someone had ended up reading that. And one day someone came to me and they said, "You really care about us, don't you?" I said, "Yes, I do." Why do you say that?" "We just learned that you didn't take your bonus." And I said, "Well, yes, I didn't think it was fair." And I think, again, in situations like that, there's opportunities to be vulnerable, to show you also willing to take the sacrifice and to show the people that transparency is so important.
It's even way more than vulnerability. It's living with extreme integrity. In other words, you won't ask of others what you wouldn't do yourself, and you live with your own internal accounting system for how you walk in this life. It's very moving. I have to say, I didn't expect to be overtaken a little bit emotionally by it, but that is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Now back to this listener though. Let's try to help them with their problem. What do you say to this person who just went through this basically fake gratitude circle? What should they do?
Well, I think the only thing they can do is be as open as and transparent with the team that they're in. And also maybe if they're brave enough, you know, having the opportunity to have a conversation with the leadership and say, "Are you aware of what that behavior communicated to us all? We may want to think about doing something different." So again, how brave can we be would be really important.
I think if we can get anything from your story, it's how important role modeling is. So, this person can, of course, role model for their team and acknowledge the loss. It's meeting people where they are. Otherwise, making the idea of gratitude feel inauthentic, it just undercuts the value of it completely.
It becomes a show, not necessarily from the heart. And gratitude's from the heart. It's not from the show.
I think that management in this case of this company has completely lost sight of the larger goal here. I mean, the reason why they probably started the gratitude circle was an exercise for people to understand the context of larger things going on and acknowledge even the little things in the office. But it's exactly for this moment of acknowledgement. Like, okay, let's say these people, unfortunately we had to have a layoff, but you guys are valued. And I want to be grateful for that, that we can make it through this very difficult period together. And what I would invite them to do is to remember why we do this and look for deeper meaning. When we say be thankful for the little things, we're not talking about the mouthwash in the bathroom. But what we're talking about is let's be grateful about real things and real work and make it authentic. So, what I would say to this listener is reevaluate why you're doing it. Please bring it to your boss's, I think, attention, to your manager's attention, to your coach's attention, but explain that this was really, I think, done in poor taste and that we need to maybe try it again.
100% solid advice. So good on the listener that brought it up. And I hope that that person's going to be brave enough to make a big impact in the company by bringing it to the attention in a caring, sharing, and loving way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. I do hope as well as you that this person will be brave and will be able to make a change in their company. Let's move to the next question. Our next listener question is from a marketing manager who is not a micromanager, despite the feedback that they've received. Here we go. Hello, Maya. I manage a team in a fast paced marketing department, and I recently got some feedback that I am micromanaging. I care a lot about the work and our team's reputation, and I don't think this feedback is fair. I can be particular. I like things done a certain way, and I don't have much patience for stuff slipping through the cracks. When things go wrong, I'm usually the one jumping in to fix it, because if I don't, who will? I even had a talk with my team to explain that my working style might be different from what they have experienced, but it does not mean that I micromanage. I mean, I do not ever hover over my team members when they work or yell at them for stuff. I don't want this unfair feedback to hurt my chances for promotion. How do I convince my manager that I am, in fact, not micromanaging? So, Gary, thoughts? How does this non micromanager stop coming off as a repeat micromanager?
If their team tells them they're a micromanager, they are a micromanager. So, one of the things that we don't like, and I talk about in Alec or Alice, the soul sucking CEO, is they hate feedback. And my dear friend Marshall Goldsmith, who is the number one CEO coach in the world, would tell you that if your team is telling you that, you better believe it. and then going and having a meeting with the team and convincing them that what they believe is not true is certainly not going to help at all. So, the person who's shared this with us, congratulations that you've got this feedback. Take it, use it. And then maybe the meeting you should have had was, I heard some feedback that you think I'm a micromanager. I really don't want to have that as the feedback. I want to do something different. How should I change? What behavior should I change to stop, the team feeling that I'm a micromanager? And can you imagine how much they might learn from that conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of interesting that this person is asking. They said, I even had a talk with my team to explain that my working style might be different from what they have experienced. And by the way, I respect that. Your working style might be different from what they experience. But I tend to agree with you. If they see that as micromanagement, then, it's on you to try to change your working style to match what the team needs of you. And even if you don't hover and you don't yell, it doesn't necessarily make you a great leader. In other words, let's work on how to become a better leader. And just to go back to your previous suggestion, I also think that you're absolutely right that having that kind of meeting where you change rather than, I'm not a micromanager as the topic of the meeting, but how can I be a better manager? And how can I stop doing some of these behaviors? I can tell you that team will respond to it greatly. The whole attitude of the team could change. And of course, the attitude towards you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, can you imagine? Like, here's two scenarios, right? The person that we just shared with us, they had the meeting where they did what they did. Everybody leaves the meeting going, see, I told you that person, he or she wasn't going to listen to us. Why did we bother? What are we doing here? My goodness, it's just, can you imagine the back chatter around that? Or if the person went in and said, I just heard this and wow, I'd love to hear more from you all. I may not see it and I don't agree with you, but I want to learn more about all of that. So can you imagine how they would feel in that scenario?
Mhm.
Unbelievably more comfortable. Unbelievably more
And
comfortable.
how do we also help this listener be open to hearing what people are saying? Because it's hard. Chances are that sometimes we do have a more sort of visceral feeling. Any
Yeah,
sort of
absolutely.
tips on how we can control some of those emotions as we're receiving the feedback?
Well, it's hard. Those emotions are going to come across you and you've just got to take a deep breath and think, okay, this is going to help me. So I wanted to help me. And Marshall Goldsmith has a wonderful process called feed forward instead of feedback. And feed
Mm.
forward is you go into a room with your people and you say, hi, I'm Maya. I want to be less of a micromanager. Could you all give me your suggestions on how I should do that? And in fact, it's a great way in a team because it's kind of like speed dating. If you ever get in a group, you get these people, and all you can say when someone gives you that feed forward is thank you. That's all you could say. So I've done this exercise many times. You have a group of people and they're all in a room, you go. And I'll go to you, Maya, and say, Maya, I want to be a better listener. How do you think I should do that? And you say something and I say thank you. And you move on to the next person. And it's just a wonderful way of getting people's opinions and advice, really.
Wonderful. Such a great example. Well, I do hope that we've broadened this listener's thinking, and I hope that going forward they'll be able to come at that feedback a little bit different. And as far as getting that promotion, listener, I think you need to give yourself a little bit of time, make a few little changes, but don't worry about the promotion yet. Worry about listening to your team first. Again, thank you, Gary. Your take on everything is very refreshing. I'm hopeful that listener can unstick their thinking. Let's move to the next question. This week's cringeworthy question is about what can happen to your weekend when you say maybe instead of nope. Okay, here we go. Dear Workplace Weirdness, my boss handed out printed invitations to her kid's birthday party in the office. The party's at a trampoline park, and she kept mentioning how so many adults flake and how it's so great to have responsible people around. I'm one of the only people on the team without kids, and she started saying things like, you'd be so great with the little ones, and we really could use an extra pair of eyes on the bounce house. I said maybe to be polite, and now she's asking if I can come early to help set up. Am I being invited to a birthday party or recruited as a babysitter? And how do I get out of this? Well, we might have a cringier than usual boundaries issue here. Gary, what do you think this listener could do in this situation?
There's so many different perspectives. And firstly, in a normal situation, in an environment in the US where we live, this is probably a bigger ask than that leader is entitled to make. If they want a babysitter, get a babysitter. Again, not understanding the culture of the organization. Is this an organization where the family culture is so close that everybody may feel this is acceptable? But I think the person has, or the person with the question has the right to be able to say, hey, I really don't feel comfortable about doing that. I'd certainly like to help you with some of the organizational logistics, but I don't see that I would feel comfortable being the one person out of the loop. I'm kind of like the one person out because I'm not there with my kids, having them in the jumping, whatever, whatever. So maybe the manager doesn't really understand how uncomfortable they're making this person feel because they're asking them to be in an environment that is not one that they're going to feel comfortable in.
It's true. It's not in every culture acceptable, but there are places and times where sometimes bosses cross some boundaries. In fact, as I was reading this question, I even thought about myself. I threw an event and I invited the people who I work with because I consider them my friends. They're the people I spend a lot of time with, and I wanted them to come. But I all of a sudden, in light of this question, thought to myself, wait, do they feel obligated to come? I hope not. There is a little bit of a power dynamic that sometimes maybe leaders don't understand that they're putting out there. That being said, there are lots of advantages to why somebody might in a situation like this. If I was a younger person in my career, for instance, I had one boss that I loved, loved, loved. And if she had invited me over to her kid's birthday party, I probably would have reacted as this listener reacted. I probably would have been like, sure, I'll be there because I would want to see her off hours. I would want to help out in any way that I can. In the case that it was like at her house or something like that, sometimes even just I guess, the allure of seeing like where this person lived or a little bit of that might have called out to me. That being said, I don't see any of these advantages in this listener's question. She's going to a trampoline park. She has to babysit. It sounds terrible. I personally, my first thought was like, just say that you have something else to do. It's the weekend. As the employee, I can understand how this does not sound appealing in any way.
What you said, Maya, is fair. If this was a party where everybody was there and we were all in that environment, that's fine. And I would go too. I mean, yeah, I'd love to go and be at my boss's house and mingle and show 'em. But this situation is one where this person is kind of one person out. It would be like saying, I'm going to have a dinner party and everybody's going to bring their husband, wife, or significant other. And you come and your signal. And I would say, I don't really want to go because I'm going to feel like I'm not part of it. So I think the nuance here is it's an event where this person is not part of the participation that the event's focused on. Therefore, they would feel really uncomfortable. And I think that's the conversation maybe to have with her boss. Say, look, not, there's nothing more that I would love than to be in the environment with my work people. But I don't feel comfortable because it's not something that I can really participate in. I feel like I'll be the odd man, odd woman out. And I don't want to feel that way. And I think that honesty with her boss is very powerful.
Yeah, and I hope that the boss would respect that. I also want to say that I really applaud this listener for writing in because I think what it demonstrates is that they have clear boundaries for themselves and they don't want to be setting up a pattern where they're crossing those boundaries. I just know that it's hard and you do have to exhibit bravery to have that conversation with your boss. But similar to you, Gary, I think that conversation needs to be had. And yes, you do need to be brave. And I think that's the hardest part about this. Thank you so much for all of your wise advice here. From forced gratitude circles to mandatory bounce house overtime. That's our show today, folks. I want to thank you, Gary, for sharing your experience and humility, and not to mention, and I say this with the utmost respect, your dumbassery with us today. Any last thoughts before we go?
Well, hey, don't forget, people can take the dumbass quiz if they want to test their level of dumbassery. And if they'd like a simple way of doing that, go to my website, www.thelearningmoment.net. And once you've taken the dumbass quiz, you will get your dumbass score. And the higher your score in dumbassery, the closer you are to that leadership level. Yeah.
Absolutely.
My last thought often is, life is a gift. Don't set it back unwrapped.
Another zinger for the books. We got good ones. Wonderful quotes. I love it. Thank you so much. And we'll do some pondering on some of those wonderful sayings that you have. Well, this was the last episode of our first season. So thank you to everyone from our guests to Workplace Weirdness staff to the team at Podify and all of our social media friends. This first season has been a weird and wonderful ride. We will be back in the fall, so keep following us for updates and announcements. If you've enjoyed our dive into the strange and funny side of office life, don't forget to subscribe and send us your questions for next season. Go to workplace weirdness.com/contact us.